Can't buy me love, love, can't buy me love.
It's universally accepted that people want to buy things. In the world of economics, economists refer to this desire as demand. Demand represents how much of something people are both willing and able to pay for. Before getting into the specifics, it's important to distinguish between two slightly different concepts, quantity demanded and demand. Quantity demanded refers to how much a consumer demands at a specific price given their income and preferences. Demand refers to the whole range of quantities that a person with a given income and preferences demands at various possible prices. It's crucial to remember this, that demand is general across all prices and preferences, and quantity demanded is specific to one price. Now, if we add up the demands from different consumers in a market, we get the demand curve for the market. A demand curve is a graphical representation of buyers' behavior. The price per unit of a good is represented on the vertical axis, and the quantity that's demanded is represented on the horizontal axis. The demand curve slopes downward, reflecting an inverse relationship between the price per unit of a good and the amount that people are willing to buy at any given price. This also reflects the law of demand, which assumes that for virtually all goods and services, a higher price leads to a reduction in quantity demanded, and a lower price leads to an increase in quantity demanded. So when you consider this relationship between the price and the quantity demanded at each price, increases or decreases in price simply move you along the demand curve, since consumers are responding to a price change. Non-price factors determine the location and shape of the demand curve. Any change in these factors causes the demand curve to shift its location. If the curve shifts to the left, demand has decreased at any given price. If it shifts to the right, demand has increased at any given price. There are 5 notable non-price factors, also called demand shifters.
These are examples of demand shifters using the wine industry. The first demand shifter is income. As income rises, people increase their consumption of many goods and services. As income falls, their consumption of these goods and services falls. An increase in income leads to more people consuming wine. There are goods and services for which consumption falls as income rises. A good for which demand increases when income increases is called a normal good. This shifts the demand curve to the right. An example of this would be wine. A good for which demand decreases when income increases is called an inferior good. This shifts the demand curve to the left. An example of this would be Franzia wine.
The consumer taste and preferences category involves how the demand for a good or service shifts with respect to what consumers like at a given point in time. Often, a change in consumer preferences can make a good more or less popular, shifting the demand curve to either the right or the left. Say a new study comes out that claims wine is good for your health. Because consumers would want to drink more wine because of its health benefits, they will be willing to buy more wine at any given price. This will cause the demand curve to shift to the right.
Rachel Sloan is a wine and vin major here at Cal Poly. She explains a tastes and preferences demand shifter known as the sideways phenomenon that has greatly influenced the wine industry.
So the sideways phenomenon is based on a movie that came out in 2004 about the wine industry in Santa Barbara. And there's a very famous scene where a main character declares he doesn't want no stinking Merlot, and he wants Pinot instead. And my wine professor talked about it in class, how we remembered that day that the movie came out, and like over the weekend, and that Monday, the sales of Pinot had shot up a ton, and Merlot, there was no sales of Merlot, and that was 10 years ago, and the sales for both of them are still really high for Pinot and really low for Merlot, so that caused a big upset in the wine industry.
Another demand shifter is prices of related goods and services. Say we have 2 wines, we'll call them wine A and wine B. Both wines are of similar, if not the same quality. However, wine B is considerably cheaper. This will cause a downward shift in the demand curve for wine A because consumers will choose the wine with the better value, which in this case would be wine B.
Demographic characteristics. The number of buyers affects the total quantity of goods and services that will be bought. For example, the baby boomer generation saw an increase in population and therefore an increase in demand for wine. This means that the demand curve shifted to the right.
Decisions we make are based off of our expectations. If we are a consumer of wine, we have our own buyer expectations concerning price increases and decreases for wine. Ideally, we speak of buyer expectations in terms of expected prices of the wine we demand or intend to purchase. For now, we can use an example of expectations to explain increases and decreases in demand caused by expectations. Say we're going into the holiday season and expected that we were going to be having many parties and get-togethers. We would definitely want to buy a lot of beverages, especially wine, because we're going to be having some classy parties. Demand for wine at this time is going to be high for us because we want to be prepared with all the wine for our parties. Now, if we were going into the summer, we don't expect to be bringing wine to a barbecue on a hot summer's day. We would expect to bring some beer and other refreshing beverages instead of wine. So demand for wine at this time decreases since we expect a different type of beverage selection for the summer.
We are now going to talk about elasticity. To show how responsive quantity demanded is to a change in price, we apply the concept of elasticity.
Economists have repurposed the word elasticity to describe how changes in one variable affect another variable. When they say demand elasticity, they mean a concept called the price elasticity of demand. This is a measurement of how much the quantity demanded changes when the price changes. A vertical demand curve is said to be perfectly inelastic because no matter what the price is, the quantity demanded remains the same. A horizontal demand curve is said to be perfectly elastic since even a small change in price causes a big change in the quantity demanded. Of course, perfectly elastic or perfectly inelastic demand curves aren't very common. Nearly all demand curves slope downward, meaning that moderate changes in price cause moderate changes in quantities demanded. The flatter a demand curve becomes, the greater the changes in quantity demanded for any given price. Video presentation on market demand. We hope you have learned what demand is. Before we end this video, we'd like to share a little strategy that we use to help us remember these 5 demand shifters. The acronym is PDTIB, better known as Please Don't Take Intimate Baths. P represents prices of related goods, D represents demographic characteristics, T represents tastes and preferences, I represents income, and B represents buyer expectations. So when in doubt, just remember this phrase and you will forever be an expert on the 5 demand shifters.
As soon as I did that, I was like, I'm writing